It's been a while since I last looked at Golden Sun. I had a lot to say about The Lost Age. Looking back on it, it's weird to see that I ended up talking about it for 40 minutes despite having such mixed feelings toward it. But it ended up being my most viewed review, so it must have done something right. It's so crazy how easily I can find my own video in the YouTube search bar. It's even crazier that I've made 2 videos that ended up being longer since then. And this one is longer! So now we're at Golden Sun Dark Dawn, the newest game in the series. And it's nearly 10 years old, yikes. Being a relatively little-known series, along with coming out at the end of a system filled to the brim with other RPGs, isn't a great combination. The game didn't sell well, so another entry never got greenlit, which is a shame because with the right improvements, this series could be one that I really enjoy. Dark Dawn is considered to be the bad one by fans, or at the very least the weakest entry. I've heard about quite a few of the common issues fans had, the various points of no return, being able to miss a fourth of the gin, the cliffhanger ending, all that jazz. Wait, what's the opposite of jazz? I don't know, let's say K-pop. Point is, Dark Dawn's got issues. But I'd like to keep somewhat of an open mind going into it. There could be something about this game that ends up clicking with me more, who knows. Because like The Lost Age, I've never played this game before. I remember always seeing this game at Walmart around 2011-2014 with all the 3DS games. There was always 2 or 3 copies on the shelf that never got sold for some reason. Yeah, it was one of those games. Along with Mario All-Stars on Wii and whatever random shovelware game that was still full price. I heard these games were good, so I was always curious what kind of game it was and why seemingly no one wanted it. But just a heads up, I try my best to use official releases for these reviews whenever I can, but since Dark Dawn is a DS game and not on the Wii U eShop, I have to use emulation to record footage. Unless you want the whole video looking like this. I did buy the game, of course. I found a copy at GameStop for $15 a few months back. And hey, look at that. The guy who had this before me actually finished the game. That's pretty cool. I was honestly expecting him to give up halfway through or something. This movie makes some god-awful screeching noise at the file select, so I'm playing on Melon DS, just in case anyone's curious. So if there's any inconsistencies with DS holdware, that's probably why. Trust me, I hate this line on some dialogue boxes just as much as you do. It played fine other than some graphical issues here and there. And actually there was one part where I needed to look at the ground and know what spells to use, and it was glitched on the emulator, so I needed to look up a walkthrough for that part, but it's playable otherwise. I'm really curious about Dark Dawn. It surely can't be bad, right? It's been 30 years since the events of The Lost Age. The power of alchemy is restored to the world, and I think Isaac is just some low-key god or something now. I don't know. But it doesn't matter that I don't know, because the game starts off recapping what happened in the last 2 games anyway. It's not something that I really mind, but considering there's these books that you can find that just recap the last 2 games in more detail, it seems redundant putting it at the beginning. Although it's kinda cool to see The Lost Age from Isaac's perspective. They assumed Felix and friends were evil, and were understandably confused when they heard they were helping people along the way. Also, Alex is Mia's cousin, apparently. I knew they were from the same water tribe, but I didn't think they were blood relatives. The protagonists of the previous games were known as the Heroes of Vale, and they were praised and blamed for saving the world. Alchemy is really unstable, so even though the world isn't dying anymore, there's a bunch of weird side effects. Like, the world is slowly expanding now instead of shrinking, and it caused the geography to get all messed up. And there was a race of beastmen that are these animal-human hybrids. They apparently existed in ancient times before alchemy was sealed, so it's not a totally new thing to this world, but it's kinda weird to see how people just randomly turn into beastmen over time, or like, whatever, this is my life now, I guess. I just thought that was funny. Natural disasters are more common too, although we don't actually see any aside from these black holes popping up in places. Isaac and Garrett live in the crater where Vale once was, now called the Goma Plateau, and they study the effects of the Golden Sun. Apparently. They don't explain what they learn, but this story isn't about Isaac and Garrett, it's about their kids. Isaac and Jenna's son is named Matthew, who takes the role of silent protagonist. I swear to God, if Matthew talks in some theoretical new game, I will write a very strongly worded paragraph in one of these videos. I don't mind that he's silent, just don't do what they did in The Lost Age. Be consistent. Anyway, it turns out that a bunch of Psynergy vortexes are showing up everywhere. They're basically Psynergy black holes. They suck up the elemental energy around them, so they're hella bad for Adepts, and pretty bad for everyone else. There was one so big it was called the Morning Moon, and it caused a ton of destruction. Also, I should mention that the game has this encyclopedia over story terms, so if you don't know what something is, you can either tap it or press L or R to refresh yourself. It's appreciated, but having it be underlined in red just irritates me. It's like it's taunting me to click on it or something. I hate it. Point is, they have to get to Soul Sanctum quick. Getting there isn't easy, so I haven't made this Soul Wing for them that lets you use wind synergy to fly around, controlling the wind around you with the help of some kite thing to fly in the air. I already made the Avatar connections earlier, but they're borderline stealing ideas at this point. Look, just play the joke already.
Earth. Fire.
A Soul Wing is incredibly rare and hard to make, so naturally, Tyrell, Garrett's son, decides to take it on a joyride with his fire skills. He has no idea what he's doing flying this thing and wrecks it in a nearby forest, so Matthew and Karis, Ivan's daughter, have to rescue his ass. With Isaac and Garrett chaperoning their heroic rescue, of course. It's really weird how their parents seemingly don't trust them at first. I get it with Tyrell, he seems to radiate pure dumbass energy, but Matthew and Karis are fairly capable even at this point, so their lack of faith in them feels so off-putting. I get going with them, but Garrett is straight up like, we can't take them, they're kids. Bitch, weren't you saving the world around this age? Isaac cuts them some slack at least. They really hold your hand during this opening section. I mean, I get why, maybe some players might not know how to do RPG things, but being able to skip how to navigate menus to do things that are obvious to me would be appreciated. The last games assumed you knew what you were doing, so all this hand-holding just feels out of place. Like, holy hell, they stop you right before your first random encounter to be like, there's monsters nearby, be careful. I know. Shut up. Karis just killed both these weak sauce enemies with one attack. Just let me play the game, please. Oh my god, these nagging assholes are even stopping to tell me how to use Synergy on the field, even though I already did it. It's like getting to the Pokemon catching tutorial with a full party. Did these guys not realize that Matt and Karis know how to do the thing they've been in training for? Isaac is shocked that Matt knows how to move a stone. Like, god, why do I need an entire cutscene to tell me how to do this? This opening section is awful. It's a blatant tutorial that you can't skip. The worst part is when Garrett shows you how to use Fireball. He's like, we're the heroes of Vale, we got this. And then in the same cutscene, takes 3 or 4 tries to figure out that you can burn this giant flower. Please, stop talking. But luckily, this only goes on during this opening section. There's hardly any tutorials after this. Thank God. I don't mind tutorials in games, but the ones here are so obnoxious. Most of them really didn't need to be here. The first boss is probably one of the easiest first bosses I've seen, too. I beat this dumb plant thing in like 2 turns. I saw that I could summon Meteor on the first boss and just let it rip. The first boss is supposed to be easy, but wow, does this game assume you're a giant idiot baby in the beginning. The first game started out with Jenna's family, to your knowledge, dying in front of you and having the villains beat you to submission. That's quite the 180. And yeah, RPGs tend to bombard you with mountains of cutscenes at the beginning. I'm used to this. But Dope Dawn's opening is just so slow. And this is coming from a guy who loves Persona 4. It's been like 2 hours and I'm just now playing the game. I've never been so happy to see someone get hit with a golf club. Off topic. Anyway, you find Tyrell passed out deep in the tangled wood next to another Synergy vortex. Tyrell broke the wings on the Soul Wing, so they need another Rock's Feather from Morgall to fix it. Isaac and Garrett need a monitor mount left, so it's up to the kids to get the feather for them. They also asked them to meet up with Kraden on the way there, and in case you're wondering how this dude is still alive after 30 years, everyone directly exposed to the Golden Sun age very slowly now, so Kraden's about the same age he was in the last game. He's still doing his alchemy research, but now with Reef and Noelle. Mia's kids. That's one of the things I really don't like about this story. You're really telling me that all 4 protagonists of the first game all had kids around the same time, and now they're all setting out on a journey together about the same age as when their parents did? That feels so artificial, that just doesn't happen. I can buy Matthew and someone else being close in age, but all 4 feels like they were pushing it. And where's Jenna and Ivan in this situation? I'm assuming her and Isaac are married. Do they not live together? And I guess Ivan is just totally okay with him sending his kid off on some dangerous journey, like, alright, sounds good, you go, girl. And why does Isaac not see his son off? That's such a dick move. Could sending the letter not wait 5 minutes? These people go from constantly holding your hand every 5 seconds to, oh, I guess you don't need us anymore. Bye. I get their concern, I really do, but Isaac isn't even worried at this point like Garrett is. I know Isaac was an edgy, stoic bitch when they were fighting the Doom Dragon that turned out to be their parents, but I'm genuinely concerned that he isn't worried at all. Seriously, Isaac, what the hell is wrong with you? Some of these oversights feel especially weird given how much the characters talk in this game. There's a lot more cutscenes in Dark Dawn, and a lot of it really doesn't say much. I'm all for the characters interacting with what's going on and giving them, you know, character, but did I really need a 5-minute cutscene telling me how to turn on this Synergy Forge? Connect the lines, hit the fire symbol with the fireball. I figured it out just by looking at it. What's with the long-winded explanation? I'm assuming these tutorials are for kids and stuff, but even a kid can figure that out. It's not hard. Characters saying a whole lot of nothing was still an issue in previous games, but it's much more obvious here with how much more time is spent in cutscenes. The previous games really didn't have too many cutscenes. There was still plenty, obviously, but they usually didn't last very long, except for big points in the story. In Dusk Dawn, it seems like there's another cutscene every time anything happens. It wasn't really a big deal for me, but I could see why someone else might be annoyed by it. Another weird thing about the story is this new feature where instead of picking yes or no, you usually have 4 different emotions to pick from. You still say yes or no sometimes, but having this just feels weird in practice. It works when they ask you how you feel about something, but when they ask you an actual question, I never know what to pick because I don't know what I'm about to say. It reminds me of Fallout 4 where I only have 4 dialogue options, but they don't give you the whole line in the dialogue box. How am I supposed to answer when I don't know what I'm saying? But this luckily isn't Fallout, and the emotion you pick doesn't impact anything. It's mainly just characters responding differently. It was a nice idea, but I hope they don't bring this back. I'd rather just have multiple dialogue choices. When they ask a question, they have 3 or 4 options of what to say. I like that. It makes the self-insert silent protagonist feel a little more like you. It's a step in the right direction, but its implementation is just awkward as all. And for some reason, after every cutscene, there's this little onward box that shows up. I don't get this. Why do you need to tell the player that the cutscene ended? It's not hard to tell when you have control again since the HUD comes back up. You can press any button to make it disappear, so it's only a minor annoyance, but it really didn't need to exist at all. I'm just glad you don't have to press the touchscreen to end it like the animation implies. That would have been borderline pace breaking. You can control the whole game with the touchscreen, similar to Phantom Hourglass and Spirit Tracks, but unlike those games, you can actually use buttons like a regular video game. Speaking of DS stuff, this game really doesn't use any of it other than 3D graphics. And speaking of that, this new 3D perspective made it hard to tell when I can walk behind things sometimes. It could just be a me issue, but it really tripped me up at certain points. The entire game is on the bottom screen as well, and the top screen is either a map or a status screen. Even in battle, the top screen is just a status screen, even though your health and PP are still in the corner of the bottom screen anyway. I'd imagine it would feel awkward on DS, but at least it makes it easier to record via emulation like I have to. I might as well talk about the new stuff in Dusk Dawn because there isn't much, to be honest. It's mostly quality of life stuff. I really appreciate the bigger field skill range. You had to be right up against something before, but now you can stand a decent distance away from it to still count. That's really nice. You can aim field skills with a touchscreen, but you auto-target anything that can be targeted within your range, so it felt kinda pointless. Even when you do need to aim, you can also aim with L and R. It makes it less cumbersome when dealing with multiple grab targets. And remember how in previous games, if you had multiple characters targeting the same enemy, and the enemy died before another character gets to attack it, they just revert to guarding instead? That's finally gone. It makes spamming regular attacks on random enemies much more convenient, but they sometimes still guard for some reason. I guess it's because they can only change to an adjacent enemy or something? I don't know, it just happened every now and then. I don't get what's different. Weapons in Golden Sun have this thing called a Howl, where there's a chance that the standard attack is replaced by a much more powerful attack. That's been expanded in Dusk Dawn, so that the more a character uses a weapon, they get access to better Howl attacks. I really like this. Giving hand-me-down weapons to other party members isn't always the best option now because they have to learn all the attacks the previous character could already use. There's a con to giving someone a new weapon, so you have to take into consideration if making your attack stat higher is worth not having access to better attacks right away, or you could just grind it out, but you really don't need a grind in this game. And if you think this is some kind of segue into the game's difficulty, okay, it is. Dusk Dawn is really easy. But that's the thing, the last 2 games, especially the Lost Age, were also really easy. I don't get how it's suddenly an issue for people here. Although maybe I wasn't abusing the difficulty as much as I could have, because your PP recharge is super fast in this game. PP in Golden Sun always recharge just by walking around, so you can use your field skills without getting soft locked, which was a small annoyance before. Sometimes you just run around in circles waiting to get enough PP to use a field move. But they overcorrected it in Dusk Dawn. In virtually every battle in the game, I was at nearly full PP, so there's no reason why you can't just spam your best attacks to defeat enemies. And since everyone has some kind of healing spell, everyone's always at full health going in. Your inventory is still limited, so healing items felt almost useless. Even the rare items that revive party members didn't feel helpful carrying around, since almost everyone can have a Jinn that revives anyway. Not that you even need many revives, because there may be only 2-3 fights where anyone died at all. Yeah, maybe that's what people mean when they say Duck Dawn is way too easy. You have an insane amount of resources to work with. Even when they give you those full PP restores like in previous games, I often opted to not use them because I was already at nearly full PP. All it really takes is one room without random encounters to get back to max. It's insane. You always have enough for field skills, that's for damn sure. I only had to run in circles maybe once or twice in this game. I think the better solution is just make field skills not use PP. The PP recharging rate was fine in the previous game, so that would give you a good middle ground. You can take advantage of the regenerating synergy points while also being in danger of running out if you abuse it too much. And since field skills use no PP, you would still be able to solve the game's puzzles without needing to worry about an arbitrary resource. You know, that's another thing about this game. The puzzles are way too easy. They were never mind-bending or anything before, but you at least needed to think about them sometimes. There was maybe one or two in Duck Dawn that I had to think about, but I was never even remotely stumped. I can get making them more straightforward because it's an RPG. That's gotta be frustrating when the only thing you weigh is some puzzle you don't understand, when the game itself has a pretty moderate difficulty. But I actually liked solving them. The ones here often give me an empty feeling, like, wow, does this even count as a puzzle? Like, you're supposed to use Savetta scent tracking to figure out where you're supposed to go in this dungeon, but it's a straight line to the end of the dungeon. What's the point of this? You needed to fall down the right hole, but you could have figured that out by just trial and error, so you don't need it at all. It's used much better later when you have to follow a specific path, so that's what should have been done here. These easy puzzles really aren't that big of a deal, but when you've got an entire dungeon of stupidly straightforward puzzles, they should have put more effort in these. It just makes it a slog to go through. But on the bright side, at least there was never anything so cryptic that you practically needed a guide for it. Seriously, I don't know how anyone thought some random dancing kids was a good enough clue that I was supposed to do the exact same thing in the Sea of Time. The puzzles in Duck Dawn definitely needed to be more thought-provoking in general, but I appreciate the lack of cryptic ones. I should really explain who these people are and how they got here, at least. So after Tyrell joins the party and they leave for their journey, they go through this training camp as another sword tutorial. Okay, look, I love this place. It's just so pathetic. There's cardboard cutouts of the previous antagonists, there's legitimate puzzles, and it feels like some NPC put a lot of effort into it. I want to congratulate this guy because he worked hard and deserves recognition. But after progressing for a little while, the map pack meet up with Kraden in some cave, who's joined by Mia's kids. Reef almost gets sucked into a vortex because this dude seemingly has no common sense and everyone else gets attacked by soldiers. This is my favorite fight in the game. These guys can throw synergy grenades and drain everyone on their PP, and since you're low on PP, you naturally revert to relying on your Jin or regular attacks. It feels really similar to the Doom Dragon from the Lost Age because it makes you fight in a completely different way. Early on, you don't have enough Jin to constantly spam them in boss fights, so I usually just use my best magic attacks due to the sheer amount of PP the game gives you. Again, you almost never run out. But since my Jin are limited and amount of PP to use, I'm planning my moves strategically, and Karis even ended up dying. Luckily, I have a Jin to revive her, so I'll just... Wait. She's holding Jolt. Son of a bitch. Oh well, I won anyway. This kind of stuff is what this series needs more of. After this, I can use the exact same strategy on every boss, which just gets boring. Jin and summons are way too damn strong. Reef gets kidnapped during the fighting, and two of the villains of the hour decide to show up. Platos and a masked man. His identity is a total mystery. I have no clue who he... Wait a minute. Oh my god, is that Luigi? What's he doing here? The masked man wants a glyph book that allows you to read ancient texts for some reason. I don't think this is ever brought up again. Platos forces Matthew to go south, the opposite direction that you want to go, while Kraden and Noelle head north to Belinsk. And because of the nearby vortex, you can't go through Kraden's exit because of how much bigger it'll be by the time you're able to. After leaving the cave, these assholes block the path behind you, meaning you can't go back the way you came. More on that in a bit, and then you just find Reef in literally the next room trapped in a box. What exactly was the point in kidnapping him? Platos taunts the party, I guess, and just leaves. He's like, ho ho ho, you cannot go back the way you came. You must go around the mountains, which is far too treacherous for you. Okay, bye. Reef joins the party, and everyone has to take the long way around the mountains. Oh, and if you're wondering what happens to Noelle, she's just never seen again. Even when you meet up with Kraden later on, she's not with him, and Reef is later like, bro, where the hell is my sister? And apparently Kraden and Noelle met up with Piers off screen. She thought Piers was hot, so she went traveling around with him instead. I don't blame the girl, but like, wow, that's so dumb. He's a skilled water adept, so Kraden figured it would be a good learning opportunity for her. And yeah, she definitely wants a piece of his synergy points, let's put it that way. As for the previous party members, they're not in this game much. You don't see Isaac and Garrett at all past the intro. Jenna, Ivan, and Mia had kids. Felix decided to wander off God knows where. Pierre sails around the world for some reason, and Sheba, I don't know, they don't even mention her. I get that this story isn't about them, but it feels weird to mention the whereabouts of so many of them and just never show them. Like, bro, there's a MILF Mia and Jenna running around. I want to know what they look like now that they're older. For, research. But do you know what's really dumb about this game? For some stupid reason, there's like 4 points of no return. 4. Like, not 1 at the end of the game right before the final boss, like a normal video game. 4. To make things worse, you can actually miss Jin in this game. And not like 1 or 2. No. I'm talking 24. Out of the 80 that you can collect. Sure, they hand these things out like candy, and it seems like you're finding a new one every 5 seconds, but being able to miss that many and being locked out of previous areas for artificial reasons is just bullshit. And the worst part is the lack of fast travel. Despite the Lost Age giving you teleport in the final dungeon, Dark Dawn doesn't have it. At all. Like, my god, why are these games so allergic to fast travel? There's no point. You hardly ever need to backtrack in Dark Dawn, but giving you teleport right after the Craggy Ruins would have solved this huge issue. Then you could return to previous areas and get any Jin or secrets you missed. Due to these points of no return, Dark Dawn feels really segmented. The world map isn't one big one like in previous games. There's multiple ones that segment you to whatever part of the game you're in. It ends up making the world feel smaller than before, despite the fact that it's supposed to have grown within the last 30 years. It's a lot more linear than before too. It's pretty hard to get lost this time. It's actually an issue I had in previous games. I got lost easily and would often have to look up a walkthrough just to point me in the right direction for where I needed to go next. Not here, I was always able to figure out where to go. They definitely overcorrected it though. I was just asking for an objective marker on the map, not for it to be oversimplified. There are a few points where you can do things out of order, but it feels like they weren't written with this in mind. Like you're supposed to go into this giant maze thing called the Ouroboros to get this sun mask, but when meeting with this Emperor dude, they're like, whoa, what's a sun mask? Despite already learning about it in Passage. Speaking of which, after Reef joins the party, there's a pretty large chunk of time where absolutely nothing story related happens. You have to fix the Synergy Forge in Passage to get past Craggy Peak to get into Morgul, which is where Belinsk is. Also during this part of the game, they mentioned the Jenny? Is that how you pronounce it? I was misreading it as June for a good chunk of the game, but let's go with Jenny. That's my default name for any female Pokemon I can't think of a name for, so I just think that's funny. It also kind of sounds like Ginny, so it was probably intentional. But anyway, the Jenny were what Adepts were called in the ancient times before alchemy was sealed. They were more important later. This part of the game is more for lore purposes, I guess. But my issue with the new lore is that a lot of it doesn't really make sense within the time frame it happened. Like, Ayutthaya was blessed with an alchemy well that never dries up by the Jenny in ancient times. But this is a new location. I think it's safe to say we went pretty much everywhere during the last 2 games, so this new location that's only about 20 and 30 years old having so much history feels weird. Same with Passage. I don't remember this place. I definitely don't remember this big-ass forge, and I sure as hell don't remember this futuristic-ass defense wall they got set up. The worst offender of this is the Beastmen, though. I get that they existed before alchemy was sealed and just faded from existence afterwards, but their recent history makes no sense. They came into existence, people became racist toward them, they had a revolution with some war, I think. They got independence and their own country, and their royal family grew up as royalty, all within the span of 30 years. What? Lore-wise, it feels like at least a few hundred years passed since the Lost Age, but it's actually been 30, and that just doesn't make sense given how much history happened within that time. The side stories in Dark Dawn just feel rudimentary. I don't know, they're just not that interesting. Fix this well, find this dude in a cave, go into some dream world and rid the town of his bad dreams by killing this lizard thing. Okay, that one was cool. There was no town of werewolves, no killing some gremlin thing to drain a flooding town. All this side stuff just feels so ordinary by comparison. The main quest isn't as interesting either. Before you were off saving the world from destruction, but now you're just getting some rare feather to fix some wing pack Ivan made. The stakes are really low for most of the game. Even if you fail, it's not like Isaac or Garrett couldn't do it instead. Yeah, it's a chance for the kids to go out and prove themselves, but you feel more like an errand boy, not some legendary hero in the making. I do like the new characters at least. Matthew, please don't say anything ever or I swear to God. Karis is basically the responsible mom of the group. I do like her, but she really isn't much past being the voice of reason most of the time. Although I have one Twitter friend that likes her a little too much. Karis often ends up being the one telling Tyrell to stop being a dumbass, who, by the way, is insanely annoying in the beginning. Tyrell is basically, you what, mate? Personified. He picks fights and gets in trouble constantly. I'm amazed Karos hasn't tried to murder this dude by now. But he actually does mature quite a bit over the course of the game, and I did like him by the end. And that's an odd complaint people have about this game, because they say that no one really develops, but Tyrell clearly does. He's still hot-headed by the end of the game, but at least he's not picking fights with random bystanders anymore. And it's not like the previous protagonist developed either. The most they ever developed was Isaac and the gang finding out that lighting the lighthouses is a good thing. That's not development, that's just learning new information. Everyone was the same by the end of the Lost Age. Most characters not having any development isn't anything new. As for Reef, he's fine. I honestly didn't care about him much. He just seems like this smart kid that doesn't really show much emotion. Although I was surprised when Amity joined as a 5th member. I just assumed we'd be back to having 4 party members the whole game. Amity is the prince from that Ayutthaya place I mentioned. His mother died when he was young, so he doesn't know who his dad is. His dad is some random wanderer dude that didn't stay around for long and just slept with his mom and peaced out never to be seen again. Personality-wise, he's basically just respectable prince dude with daddy issues, but gameplay-wise, he was basically just Reef but better, so I more or less benched Reef after Amity joined. Reef does get group healing later, but Karos' group healing more than sufficed, and you really don't need a dedicated healer in this game, except for maybe 1 or 2 fights. Savetta is easily the best character in this game, though. She's a beast woman from Morgall that joins up after you give someone their bag back. I don't really know why she decides to join, but whatever, I'm not complaining. Also, everyone is somehow surprised when she can hear them talking like 15 feet away from her. Yeah, beastmen have heightened senses, but that's not impressive. They act like they're on the other side of the cave. The bag that you return actually belongs to a girl named Hoju, who was arrested because some guards were racist, and her brother Ryoko is trying to figure out how to get her out of jail. It's important later. Savetta is supposed to act as your guide through Morgall, but then just leaves when she finds out you're trying to kill Mountain Rock. She's with you for 1 dungeon before she's like, nope, never mind, I'll meet back up with you later. And she tells you to give the signal when you're done getting the rock feather. With this signal being one of the most complicated songs created by man that only the most talented musicians in the world are capable of playing. If this wasn't a video game, I'd be insulted that she didn't just outright tell us that she didn't want to come with us. You're sending very mixed messages here. Gameplay-wise, this girl is overpowered as hell. She can turn into this beast form that may take a turn to set up, but once you do, she does ludicrous amounts of damage. Look at this, she just shreds through bosses without even trying. Sure, she needs to use Jin to power her beast form, but who needs Jin when you do as much damage as summons for 5 to 10 turns? Combine beast form and this kite Jin that you get later on to give an extra turn to a party member, and that 1 turn setup isn't even a downside. Like seriously, after she permanently rejoins later, she almost never left the party. Even without beast form active, she still does pretty good damage with her magic attacks. I said that the Beastman's revolution was really quick, but if they're all this powerful, no wonder it didn't last long. You eventually get to Belinsk to meet up with Kraden, but no matter how hard you search, he isn't here. Despite being somewhere in Belinsk, you can't find him yet, so your next option is giving Savetta the signal to rejoin the party. But you can't do that either since the band in town only has 5 members, and just barely don't have enough members to play it. There's at least a cutscene when you leave town guiding you to the next story objective, but I actually thought I was doing something wrong. Seriously, I ran around for half an hour, where is this dude? The last member of the band wants to hear the Mountain Rocks cry with his own ears, so you just ignore finding your friends for now and just get back to finding the rock feather. This progression point feels like such a dick move. You're stood up by 2 different sets of friends. If this was real life, that'd be such an awful feeling. Probably for Kraden too. Where are you dumb kids going? I'm right here. But on the way to Bilibin, you run into some crewmates of Briggs. That pirate guy Felix and friends helped out in the Lost Age. That's really cool. What's he been up to? God damn it. Kraden decided to be Mr. Popular all of a sudden. We don't know where he is. The asshole stood us up. But Briggs' son, Iolio, is getting executed, so we have to go rescue him. Interestingly though, Briggs' son isn't a new character. He was a toddler in the Lost Age, but now he's like 30-something, and you actually see him squirming around in a cave in Belinsk. That's a really cool detail. Amity isn't comfortable rescuing some pirate, so they pull the Good Samaritan card and remind him that Hoju is also being held prisoner in the same castle. So he's like, yeah, I guess I can help save her instead of some pirate. Alright then. But then you get to Briggs and he's like, ship's broken, but some talking tree knows how to save my son. Go talk to him. Yeah, those talking trees Isaac helped out in the first game. That's cool. Which leads into a pretty good endgame with a very weird story. What is it with Golden Sun? There's plenty of points where practically nothing happens, and then they have a stupidly good final portion of the game. But yeah. Spoilers. So after ridding Kalima of their bad dreams, the Kalima forest is no longer messed up and you can actually progress down it. Once you get to Tret and Laurel, they eventually tell you that in order to wake the Mountain Rock, you need Slap's energy, which Savetta has, but she won't rejoin the party until we get this sorted out, so crap. But luckily, you can just use Slap Gloves to learn it instead, which just so happens to be back in Belinsk. Why is there so much stuff in that town? And in order to sneak into Belinsk Castle and get Iolio and Hoju out of jail, you need some power source, which you can get from the Mountain Rock. Frickin' Laurel also asks you to not restore power to the alchemy dynamo in the ruins under Belinsk. Why? Don't worry about it. She doesn't explain why, just don't, okay? Also, Amidia is a relative of Mia, somehow. That doesn't make much sense. Wait. In the intro, they clarified that Alex is Mia's cousin, and Mitty doesn't know who his dad is, just some guy who wandered into a Yuthe. Son of a bitch, Mitty is Alex's son! God damn it, and here I thought it was cool that this guy had no relation to a previous character. That's the annoying thing about this game. Every party member is the child of some previous character except Savetta. Like I said before, it just doesn't make sense that Isaac and the gang were all having unprotected sex around the same time, plus some dude from that town near Gaia Rock. And Himi does look a little younger, but I'll get to her later. Almost too conveniently, you meet up with Ryoko and Hozan in literally the next room, and Ryoko hands you the Slap Gloves, given to them by Savetta. What the hell? This girl is willing to talk to these guys without some stupidly difficult signal? You are really giving me mixed messages now. Oh, and apparently she has the nickname of the White Deer, and she is the sister of Morgul's king, Volocek, which makes Savetta a princess. That's certainly something to just casually mention. I get why she was being so secretive when he first met her, and maybe that's why she's so reluctant to join the Mat Pack, but come on, man. I feel like she could've gave us less of a runaround on this. But after finally finding this dumb bird, you can slap its... What pode even is that? Hold on. You slap its waddle? Is that right? Whatever. You grab the Rock's Feather and get interrupted by Blightos and Chalice. Oh yeah, I forgot about Chalice. She's in one cutscene before this and ends up dropping you into that maze from before. She's weirdly not very important. And the game knows how little these guys show up, because in every subsequent appearance, there's at least one party member who has no idea who they are. It's always funny to me in a really sad way. Like, there's always one poor guy left out on what's going on, and they don't even explain it to them later. If it were me, I'd just be too afraid to ask and just awkwardly stand there not knowing what's happening. But anyway, this whole situation was apparently a setup by Volocek, Savetta's brother, through no fault of hers, by the way. He knew Savetta wouldn't cooperate and help getting the Rock Feather, but Volocek needs the Mat Pack to get the Magma Orb, so Blightos and Chalice let Ryoko and Hozan escape with Savetta, giving them the Slap Glove to give to Matthew so that Blightos and Chalice can swoop in and force the party to power the alchemy dynamo. But if it doesn't start soon, Hoju and Iolio will regret it. Why is this so complicated? It took me a bit to wrap my head around this plan, and I'm not entirely sure if I'm even right at this point. And that was after playing it and rewatching this cutscene. I kinda lost track of what was happening at this point, and I just went along with it and hoped they clarified this in a simpler way or something. But they don't, so this is the best I could gather. I'm still confused, to be honest. They say you better kill the Mountain Rock and bring the Magma Orb to Belinsk, or else, and just leave. Okay. The Mat Pack kills the rock and they go inside it and get a bunch of Magma Orb fragments. Ugh. Why did they think this was a good idea, and why is it like a building inside? They find the Magma Orb at the end of this hallway, and Ryoko steals it out of desperation to save his sister. He says he could just smash the Magma Orb and kill everyone in the room, but I doubt he actually would. And everyone in the room calls his bluff, and he just gets away with it anyway. What? And I'm pretty sure he's doing it because he doesn't want Matthew to live with the guilt of breaking their promise to Laurel, but he didn't need to be such a dick about it. He even takes a Slap Glove too, so the only hope of busting Ioju out of jail is Savetta. But the band's back together, so she can finally be signaled with a song. This song opens a door, and Savetta is able to talk to you using the power of music and mind read. Somehow. I'm saying that a lot, aren't I? These games don't want for fine details. The Erungoa Prelude has magical properties or something, but it feels weird that some song would have those properties. But since it's being powered by mind magic, maybe I shouldn't question it. You meet up with Savetta in the Belinsk ruins, and Blightos and Chalice don't fall behind. Apparently these guys are from Two Repairing, a militaristic country that only wants to conquer other countries and doesn't care about the well-being of its citizens. Savetta permanently rejoins the party after being told that she was being used by her brother. You later meet up with Ryoko and Hozan, and despite how much of a dick he was earlier, they just decide to forgive him. I guess. And instead of trying to not turn the dynamo on, they're like, I guess we have to press on. I'm genuinely confused about why they have to turn it on. Blados and Shallows are basically using Hoju for ransom, but I don't see why they can't just take the magma orb and turn it on themselves. They need all 4 synergy elements to open the door to this thing, but really, this plan seems too complicated for its own good. These villains are all powerful adepts, so I don't know why they need these guys specifically for this. And to be clear, the Mat Pack is doing this because they don't really have a choice and can't rescue Ioju otherwise, but the entire way, everyone is like, we really shouldn't be doing this, and then go through with it anyway. Even after fighting Blados and Shallows and easily winning, Ryoko still uses the magma orb to activate it, and the villains get what they want anyway. Am I missing something here? There's a massive plot hole and they just don't explain. The game even knows about the plot hole because the party doesn't really know why they have to be the ones to do this either. It would have been easier and quicker to just kill the rock themselves and take the magma stone. Maybe they were going to explain in the next game? I don't know. This whole thing seems pointless, even if the dungeon was pretty enjoyable. Regardless of why these events needed to happen, the Alchemy Dynamo was activated, causing a lunar tower to rise from the ruins. It's apparently similar to the elemental lighthouses, but they don't explain how, so I don't know. I've stopped questioning things at this point. Oh, and the masked man's name is not Luigi, and in fact, Arcanus. Wow, what a twist. This place is super dangerous now, so everyone makes a mad dash for the exit. Oh, and right here, really dumb and easy to miss Jin. To my understanding, you have to wake this guy up to have him get a drink, to drop it, and make a puddle for you to freeze. It's in this very specific section of the game, and if you miss it, you'll lose it forever. Why? You can see the Jin if you explore town, but you can't get it until now in this one very specific section. Most Jin you can just find along the way as long as you pay attention, but this one is just cryptic. I don't know why you couldn't have made it so you could talk to him when he's awake or something. Like, he asks you if you want a cup of water, and he drops it, letting you get to the Jin, or if you make your way back here later, he alternatively dropped it during the night and just didn't bother cleaning up the puddle. Alternatively, you could have just had an empty bucket that you could use dowels on. Most missable Jin are just because you can't go back to previous areas for some stupid reason. This one's just dumb in general. But with Lunar Tower Rays, you're allowed back into Belin's castle to set Iolio and Hoju free. I really like how you can talk to the band members, and they think that the song raised the tower. And this girl is just like, that's it, we're only playing current music from now on. I just like the little spurts of humor these games have. I haven't found a place to really bring it up before now. So now you set Hoju free. And I mean Hoju because the game forces you to release her first. Because this one guard tells you to head right if you want to rescue the girl first, implying you have a choice, which you don't. And Ryoko tells you that he can't stop you if you want to rescue the pirate first, but he literally stops you every time you try. Just a misleading bit of dialogue that I think is funny for some reason. Anyway, for activating his tower, Volchek sets Hoju free, and Crane finally decides to show up out of nowhere. And apparently he's met Volchek before, because that's how they got their hands on the first rock feather to make the sword wing. Volchek, knowing that it's an incredibly powerful weapon, wanted Lunar Tower activated to defend Morgul from invaders, because he doesn't want the Beastmen to return to being slaves. Wow, this got dark quick. I don't know, maybe the Mat Pack had to be the ones to activate Lunar Tower because they're the only ones powerful enough yet young enough to be manipulated? That's my best guess, really, and that's not even said, just what they seem to be implying at this point. Savetta started asking too many questions, so Volchek just gets mad and leaves. How dare you, wanting to know what's going on. Matthew wasn't the only one being manipulated though, because Lunar Tower isn't a weapon in the way Volchek thinks it is. Anyone who isn't an adept in Belinsk is ironically in mortal danger with it being activated. Immediately after you rescue Iolio, an eclipse happens, and all hell breaks loose. Savetta's soul raid activates on its own and shows Volchek and his men about to be killed by some eldritch abominations, with the rest of the party being able to see it as well. It's not just those guys either, the whole town is in chaos. There's now random encounters forcing you to fight these shadowy monsters. Why are they so easy? There's parents getting separated from their kids, and people straight up dead in the streets. Oh no, he doesn't know. I thought this game was rated E10, oh my god. But you kill the monsters of the opera house with Volchek nowhere to be seen. Some opera singer gets killed and you have to freaking bury her. What the hell? This is such a tone shift. And during this whole ordeal, you get a new summon based on the Chandelier Dragon from that one Golden Sun commercial. That is so cool. Or am I Jin gonna take a dog for a walk in the next game?
Jin are for slaying monsters!
No!
Jin are for slaying monsters!
No!
Jin are for slaying monsters!
Everyone tries to escape via the docks, only to find Briggs lying in pain on a ship that was supposed to pick up Iolio. This ship saves everyone, but not at the cost of Briggs' life. Man, does that hurt. Iolio was just freed only to see his dad die right in front of him. This dude was likable too. Iolio gives him a Viking funeral though, so that's pretty badass. To help stop this mess, Iolio joins the party and pilots the ship. Yeah, the toddler adept you saw in The Lost Age is a party member in this game. I really love that. And it's a nice change of pace having a party member that isn't in the 16 to 18 range. Luckily, Volchek isn't dead yet, and is able to say its farewells to Sveta before giving her this blue orb that'll be born later. I really feel bad for Volchek. All he wanted to do was protect his people, and the villains manipulated that. Even when Belinsk is in shambles, he refuses to abandon his people and still tries his best to protect everyone, and he's the main reason they're in this mess. This poor guy must feel awful. Leaving Sveta with the party probably broke his heart too. Stop making me sad. A big chunk of Weyard is like this now, not just Belinsk. Any place exposed to the darkness of the eclipse is a shadowy death trap. This is basically the apocalypse unless we stop it. So, how do we stop it? Well, after getting this weird rock from Warriors Hill and finding a sleeping girl in Yamada, the rock fuses with her and she wakes up. She gains some third eye power, learns how to levitate, changes the fabric of reality to be sepia, and tells everyone about this Apollo lens. But in order to activate it, you have to cloak yourself in shadow with the Umbran gear to protect yourself from the pure light that the lens requires. I think light in Golden Sun has some kind of holy property to it, so too much light is dangerous, just like how too much darkness feeds these bastards. So Himi joins the party as the final member, but everyone heads up to Tonfan to get the map to the Umbran gear. Oh, and by the way, Himi is the daughter of the guy that Felix and friends helped out near Gaia Rock, who is now a king. Okay, that's weird. 3 of the 8 party members are royalty of different countries. It's a common trope in RPGs to have one party member that's royalty or someone famous, but this feels a little overboard. I know I'm being nitpicky, but it just bothered me. In Tonfan, everyone has a talk with their Emperor Yunnan, and you remember Ryoko and Hoju from before? Yeah, they're the Emperor's niece and nephew. You know, with how many characters in this game are royalty, this is starting to border on Fire Emblem. All we need now is some more. You know, a Golden Sun game in the same vein as Shining Force would be pretty cool. Off topic. Anyway, Ryoko and Hoju ran off with the Umbran map, but no one knows where they went. But Yunnan just gave Matthew a piece of Umbran gear, so hey, a head start. The puzzle to getting the map is really cool though. Hoju's mom has this echo gem that locates where the other one is. In this case, it leads right to Hoju and Ryoko. Instead of asking this guy nicely for it, you slap a gong outside to distract everyone inside and steal it. I just remember seeing the gong and instantly going, oh yeah. So you follow the radar on the top screen to Iceberg Outpost. Oh, and Hozan, the old guy following Ryoko around, he unceremoniously dies here. He's like, well, I saw Matthew again. Guess I'll die. I shouldn't be laughing at a character death, but he got injured from fighting some monsters off screen and then just decides to die. It just feels so awkward. Death shouldn't feel awkward. From here, all that's really left to do is find the rest of the Umbra gear, which is marked on your map, thank god. Oh, and in order to access the Apollo Sanctum in the first place, you need 3 colored orbs that act as the key to the gate. Volchek gives you the first, Yunnan gives you the second after bringing back Hoju and Ryoko, and the third is given to you in the tomb of Himi's great-grandmother. I think that's their relationship? Look, a talking doll is the least weird thing in this situation, but it's a good thing this last orb is yellow, almost ripped off Ruby and Sapphire there. This final portion of the game mostly has you sailing and wandering around the place. It really reminds me of sailing around in The Lost Age. I think it might be the same ship as in that game. I know Briggs' ship is another Lemurian one, but I'm not sure who ended up with this ship specifically. But unlike The Lost Age, it doesn't feel like that's all you're doing for the most part. The game gives you a better clue on where to go too. And it even has objective markers at points. See, was that so hard? That's all I wanted. Again, having the game being weirdly segmented felt like an overcorrection. This part of the game is a lot more non-linear. It's more similar to the first 2 games, exploration-wise. And that's the annoying thing about Dark Dawn's world design. It's trying to have a semi-linear world, but also a more non-linear one with this last portion. Both styles are fine, but having both at the same time feels like they decided against it near the end of development, and it just comes off as awkward. It just makes you wish the whole game was like this. I wasn't lost in the earlier sections like I was in previous games, because there's less places to go. But since there's more places to go now, they point you in the direction where to go next, either with an objective marker or giving you a hint like exploring the edge of the eclipsed areas. If they just did this the whole game while keeping the non-linear world, that would have been the best option. I really did enjoy exploring when the game let me, but not knowing where you're supposed to go next is frustrating. Segmenting everything like they did just ended up feeling unnecessary by this point, because they fixed the issues with the original style regardless. I'm alright with them experimenting with a new structure, but if there's a 4th game, they need to go back to how it was in the first 2 games. Maybe even expanding on what can be done with it, since Switch is a hell of a lot more powerful than a DS. Although as much as I'm making the segmented world out to be a bad thing, I actually enjoyed traversing Wayward more this time. While it may be more linear, it's more enjoyable than being lost. And since the worlds are a little more compact and straightforward, backtracking was never much of an issue either. Worst case scenario, you go 5 to 10 minutes out of your way, but at least you never had to run back and forth between places, or go really out of your way just to go back to previous areas. Doak Dawn still doesn't have fast travel, but despite that, I never felt bothered by it like in previous games. Do I think they had to make it like this? No, but I was never bored being lost or annoyed that I had to manually go back to a previous location, which made the game a lot more enjoyable for me. As for finding the Umbra gear itself, it's pretty straightforward. Just go to the places marked on the map and go through a short mini dungeon. It reminded me of the Trident quest in the Lost Age, but unlike that game, it's far less boring because of how much shorter it is. Making that Trident was a huge chunk of the game, but here it might only be an hour or 2 once you have the map. It's so much nicer actually knowing where this stuff is. And you get some of the best equipment in the game out of this, so it doesn't feel like a waste of time. Wait, why can this stuff only be equipped to Zavetta? I was really confused about this for the whole quest. They do tell you why later, at least. Basically, the stuff is made for Beastmen to do the labor to make the Apollo lens, so it naturally only fits her. Not that I was complaining. Giving the best gear to arguably the best podium member? I was just gonna do that anyway. I actually managed to find one of them on my own just wandering around, so it's not like they're hidden or anything. Technically, I found 2, but I thought that I couldn't progress in Burning Island because I didn't realize I could grab this rock on the wall. Again, the 3D perspective is weird sometimes. Contrary to how the game treats the Eclipsed area as a place you have to avoid at all costs, there's nothing actually stopping you from exploring it. You can actually revisit some previous areas and see how it's affecting people. Its depressing atmosphere is a really nice contrast to how carefree a lot of towns were before this. You can even head to Champa to forge any materials you have lying around. I assume that you could do that in Passage once you fix the Synergy Forge, but it just opens up an armor and weapon shop. Like, you get one thing of forgeable Zol, and it just eats up an inventory slot for most of the game. Why? Iolio's grandma does the forging in this game, which is kinda cool considering she made the Trident for you in the last game. Having to leave Champa and immediately come back is a little annoying, but not a big deal because of how good forged equipment is. It would just be nicer to get this stuff instantly. Despite the Eclipsed area sounding hard and dangerous, the enemies are about as strong as anything else at this point in the game. It's almost immersion breaking to have this ominous music while you're in the Eclipsed areas, but then have the enemies pose little threat. It's not a huge deal, but you see these enemies and assume they're super tough, but they're not, and that's just odd. I never grinded the entire game, so I doubt I'm over-leveled for these guys. The game mostly discourages you from going through these areas, but there really isn't anything to be afraid of. What's the deal? That's like warning someone not to go into the deep end of the pool despite being 6 feet tall and fully capable of swimming. I should talk about the late game podium members though. I really like Iolio because of how much of a smartass this dude is. He's really filling my new Sheba Sass quota. Himi is... I honestly couldn't tell you a single thing about this girl. She's introduced so late that she doesn't get much time to even have a personality. In fact, most of her time spent talking is just being confused about what's going on because no one ever caught her up with what's happening. She's just that person standing in the corner smiling like nothing's wrong, when in reality they have no idea what's going on, and at this point they're too afraid to ask. I feel really bad for her. The pacing of new members is really bad too. You have 5 podium members for most of the game. Zavetta joins for 1 dungeon, leaves almost immediately, and then later you get 3 podium members almost back to back. It's one thing when in the Lost Age, the 2 podies join up about 2/3 of the way through the game. That was a cool moment, but the way it's done here is just poorly paced. Iolio and Himi aren't even that good gameplay-wise either. They were both usable, but not worth being introduced so late. Himi is a mage Earth Adept, so that's kinda cool, but you ultimately just spam this dragon summoning attack when you use her, and not much else. I think Iolio is supposed to be a tank? That's how I try to set him up at least. He doesn't come equipped with much armor for some reason, so I just gave him a bunch of basic stuff and hope he'd be decent. Maybe that's on me, but using these guys weren't overly worthwhile in my opinion. But after getting the final orb and all the Umbra gear, it's finally time to make your way to Apollo's Sanctum. It's a really fun dungeon, and the outside entrance is probably the only time in the whole game when the top screen is actually used for something. I liked that. The map shows you that this place is shaped like a skull, and you have to activate switches in the right order. It's simple, but enjoyable. Inside, you have to figure out how to move these giant discs back to the main room and the entrance. And after you have all the discs, you have to move them together to make a shadow in the shape of a woman. That's really creative, even if it is easy. I don't necessarily mind easy puzzles, I just didn't like being bombarded with easy ones. Apollo Sanctum is a fun middle ground. As for what you actually use the Umbra gear for, you play as Savetta for a little bit just to place the orbs on pedestals before the light meter gets too full. That's it, really. After that, Matthew gets the Soul Blade, which is not only the best weapon in the game, but it also lets you open these sun doors. After everything's set up to end the eclipse, Orcanis shows up again. Matthew, stop swearing. This is a Christian video game. But as it turns out, Orcanis' real name is not Luigi, and in fact, Alex. To the surprise of no one. Kraden even keeps it to himself, like, I have my suspicions, but I don't want to draw any conclusions until I know for sure. Bitch, what? Just tell us, it's so obvious. Why go through so much effort to try and hide it and build up to it? I figured it out within 5 minutes of seeing him. It doesn't take a genius, Kraden. And it's not even because he has the exact same voice and appearance as Alex and hasn't aged at all because he was directly exposed to the Golden Sun. No, because the naming scheme of his fake name fits with Blados and Chalice. Whatever, I've stopped caring. Point is, Alex. We know he's uber powerful and we shouldn't mess with him. I don't blame anyone else for not knowing though. Kraden was the only one who met Alex before, so it makes sense why no one else saw this coming. Oh, and in case you're wondering how Alex is still alive, he died off screen and therefore never died. Basic storytelling logic. Anyway, the two pairing show up and attack everyone, but for some reason, they want the Mat Pack to activate the Apollo lens. Wait, then why are they even here? They're the only thing stopping us. Oh, okay. They don't want to stop the eclipse, they just want to fire it at either Two Pairing or Soul Sanctum. Either way, that sounds bad. And apparently the Two Pairing are descendants of the Umbra clan, who are also called Dark Adepts. What's a Dark Adept? Beats me. A fifth element, maybe? Wait, don't tell me that light is a sixth element. Darkness. Oh god, they got Kingdom Hearts and my Golden Sun. Stop. In some alternate universe where we have a fourth game, we'd probably know by now. But before everyone manages to pull the trigger on this thing, they get stopped by this giant wolf man called the Chaos Hound. But it seems to be sad about attacking Savetta for some reason. Yeah, this is definitely not Volachek or anything. But Blados and Chalice show up again, so you kick their asses very easily. Afterwards, they all fuse together to form the Chaos Chimera, and the final boss starts. It wouldn't be a Golden Sun game without someone fusing together to form some monstrous freak of nature. And hell, this fight is hard. This guy has attacks that rid party members of their Jin like the Doom Dragon did, but he uses it to a lesser extent, definitely not being able to wipe out your whole party of them. The big thing about this guy is his insane damage output. It's hard to keep up without grinding beforehand. I was on the edge of my seat half the time and almost lost. If I was a few levels lower or played my cards differently, I probably would have died. It was that close. And the last party member that was alive to land the final blow, Reef. The guy I had benched for 90% of the game. I love the irony. This boss is a massive difficulty spike given how easy the rest of the game is, but I love this fight because I actually had to think and plan out my attacks, and these games really need more of that. After kicking their asses again, it turns out that the Chaos Beast was Volachek. Oh my god, what a twist. Blados and Chalice basically revived him from the brink of death, but turned him into a creature of darkness that can't survive in the world of light anymore. So if we turn on the Apollo lens, he won't survive. But try as Matthew might to turn it on, there's too much light and he physically cannot do it. So, Matthew literally gives his spirit to Savetta, which is a thing that you can do, apparently. But Volachek sacrifices himself to turn it on instead. Volachek dies for real this time, and the eclipse ends, bringing Wayward back to normal. God, this poor girl. She watched her people get slaughtered by these shadow monsters and thought her brother was dead, only to find out that he's alive as some monster, and then dies for real as he sacrifices himself to save everyone. Even when she's barely able to stand, Savetta's still willing to sacrifice herself to stop everyone's suffering. She's such a sweet girl, she doesn't deserve any of this. I swear, the writers of this game were just like, let's make this girl's life as miserable as possible. Like, seriously, do these writers just want to see this poor girl suffer? This is almost Melia levels of writer abuse. Afterwards, Savetta is the Queen of Morgul now, but it doesn't matter much since the party goes their separate ways and the game's basically over at this point. Also, Lunar Tower is now Soul Tower, and everyone in Belinsk has gold fur after being exposed to the light of the Apollo lens. They even have strange powers now. I'm hoping they're light adepts or something, if that's even a thing to begin with. After the credits, Matthew, Karis, and Tyrell return home, only to find a giant synergy vortex next to Isaac's house. Is that the Morning Moon? I forgot about that plot point. I knew this game ended on a cliffhanger, but as far as obvious sequel endings go, this wasn't so bad. I was expecting it to be way worse, like they were only halfway down the quest or something, or if it was like Mother 3's end sequence but without the epilogue. But no, this journey's done. They got the Roc's Feather and they stopped the eclipse. Maybe it's because this is the start of a second journey. I don't know, I wasn't really bothered by it that much. Story in general, though, it was alright. Like the previous games, not a ton happens that relates to the main plot, except at certain points. Dokkan Dawn has a lot more plot than in previous games, but it doesn't go anywhere with it for the most part. It's really predictable, too. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but it needed some kind of twist to keep things interesting. In the Lost Age, you learn that Jenna's family and Isaac's dad are actually alive, and that lighting the lighthouses aren't the key to the world's destruction, and in fact, it's rebirth. And on top of that, it turned out that the villains weren't bad people, just desperate. Dokkan Dawn doesn't have anything like that. Tyrell broke the Soul Wing, so you need another Roc's Feather to fix it. You get the feather, but not before the world goes to hell, which also ends up being fixed. Even if the map pack failed at any point, we know that someone else could have stepped in to do it instead. There's barely any stakes here. And you know, that's actually a good point. Where the hell was everyone during the eclipse? I know that Isaac and Garrett were monitoring Soul Sanctum, but that really couldn't have waited until after the eclipse was stopped. And we know Piers is out traveling the world too, he could have helped. Piers isn't as strong as Isaac, but this dude's no pushover, he'd pull his weight just as much as anyone else. And Felix is just dicking around in some far off land, it's not like he's doing anything useful either. What the hell, dude? Give us some of that ex-protagonist power. So while the story is better told, the plot itself isn't as solid or as interesting as before. I wasn't really wondering what was going to happen next because I already knew where it was going. Dokkan Dawn's plot has some great moments and characters, but it's just not that interesting despite there being more of it than before. Dokkan Dawn has plenty of loose ends too. What are Dokkan Depths exactly? What was Alex planning? Who's this High Emperor dude? All we know about him is that he's some warmongering asshole. What's this giant Synergy Vortex going to do? What are they trying to find in Soul Sanctum? It's possible they were planning to address these loose ends in the next game, but that's the thing. There is no next game. But honestly, I'm not sure why Dokkan Dawn is the black sheep of the series. For being the one that gets picked on the most by fans, there really isn't anything outright bad about it. It's got plenty of issues, don't get me wrong. The not great story, the various points of no return, an obnoxious amount of hand-holding at the beginning, the more linear world, tons of missable Jin, the lack of innovation. This game ain't perfect. Far from it. But it had quite a few things that I just liked more. The world was more linear, yeah, but at least I never got lost, and if you needed a nudge in the right direction, you can just look at the save screen for a hint. While the story might not be as good, I could actually follow it as intended this time. I never forgot about getting that rock feather, like I forgot about Felix and Friend's motivation. There were a few parts I felt that could have been explained better, but following what was going on was really easy. They added some nice quality of life stuff too. The bigger range on field moves makes puzzles a little less cumbersome, and not reverting back to a guard if a target is no longer there is how it should have been from the beginning. The first two games were really good, but they both had their fair share of issues too. The story pacing was bad and hard to follow despite being more enjoyable overall, it was easy to get lost, and backtracking was plentiful in the Lost Age. Despite Dokkan Dawn's issues, the good makes it even out to be just as solid as the other games in my opinion, and that might be the issue for a lot of people. When you go 8 years and no new game and it ends up being about as good as before with not much innovation, that hurts. And I've been there. I was disappointed by Sly Cooper Thieves in Time hard, and for similar reasons. It was a long time since a new game, and it left the series on a cliffhanger to a game that never got made. That feeling sucks. But after recently replaying it, I went in with an open mind, and I ended up loving it despite it still being my least favorite game in the series and having the same issues I had with it initially. How do I keep finding excuses to bring up Thieves in Time? I think that the same thing could happen for Dokkan Dawn because there was a quality game here. People just didn't give it the chance it deserved. Seriously, Golden Sun Dokkan Dawn is a new level of overlooked. If you thought that the first two games didn't get enough love, you haven't seen anything yet. Golden Sun is the kind of game that a lot of people didn't play, but the general gaming populace at least knows exists. Dokkan Dawn is brought up so little, I wouldn't be surprised if a bunch of people didn't even know there was a third game. Even Golden Sun fans just tell people to skip this one, to the point where there's even a rule on the Golden Sun subreddit not to make fun of Dokkan Dawn too much. And if you look at Golden Sun reviews on YouTube, in-depth ones are practically non-existent for Dokkan Dawn. As far as I know, there's only like 1-2 scripted reviews of this game over 9 minutes at the time of writing this. I've done obscure games before, but this is a first. maybe I'm just one of the few people stupid enough to try. Golden Sun Dokkan Dawn is the overlooked entry in a series of overlooked games, and I felt that it really didn't deserve that reputation. I didn't mind going overboard talking about this game because it felt like no one else wanted to. I went in expecting this game to be awful, and it ended up being my favorite game in the series. Is it weird to say that? Because I had a ton of issues with it, I really did. But those issues ended up not bothering me much, especially since my biggest problems were story related. There was no annoying backtracking to get every Jin, I never got lost trying to find the next objective, there was never some cryptic puzzle that you practically needed a guide for, I was never bored for large chunks of the game, I enjoyed playing this game more than the others. There was some backtracking in Dokkan Dawn, but you never had to go more than 5 minutes or so out of your way. It was never run to the other side of the planet bad. Even the easy difficulty didn't bother me much, because again, it wasn't a new issue. Dokkan Dawn is about as difficult as the other games, I don't get how this is a problem all of a sudden. While I do think that they give you way too many resources to work with that destroys any sense of tension or urgency to get to a heal point, I didn't mind. There were 3 things really holding back the series in my opinion. The easy difficulty, the lack of guidance, and the story was hard to follow despite being enjoyable. Dokkan Dawn fixed 2 of these issues, and I enjoyed the game a lot more because of it. I'm honestly shocked that this is the game everyone hated. I can get why people would be disappointed by it or why it might be their least favorite, but calling it bad just feels wrong. While it did miss the mark in a few areas, this was a step in the right direction. With some extra tweaks and improvements, a new game could easily fix all my issues with the series. But therein lies the future of the Golden Sun series, by which there isn't one. Dokkan Dawn has gotta be a fitting name, because for a lot of fans, that's what this game represented. It's been nearly 10 years since a new entry. The newest game in the Golden Sun series came out the same year as Sonic Colors, Fallout New Vegas, and Halo Reach. Let that sink in for a moment. The most we've gotten since then are re-releases on Wii U Virtual Console and an assist trophy in Smash Ultimate. It still hurts. Even Camelot hasn't made anything overly noteworthy since then. They've basically been put on permanent Mario Tennis and Golf duty, which doesn't make sense to me. They're clearly talented developers. If not Golden Sun, why not have them make another RPG? Mario and Luigi is sadly down the toilet, why not let them take over? There is some light at the end of this tunnel at least, because they recently renewed the Golden Sun trademark in 2018, which usually doesn't mean anything, but they also renewed Dokkan Dawn, which feels oddly specific. They didn't renew Custom Robo, so Golden Sun at least has a better shot than that, although I'm not a lawyer so I could just be reading way too into this. But if they made a new Golden Sun game, they could go 2 routes, either a remake to gauge interest, or a new game entirely. If they go the remake route, they would obviously want to put the first 2 games together to make them the single entry they were always supposed to be, but I'd say go the extra mile and include Dokkan Dawn while you're at it, because assuming they actually continue the story instead of going the Final Fantasy route for a sequel, people are going to want to play the events leading up to the new game. And since the game rarely used both screens at once, converting the game for one screen wouldn't be too hard. These games could use a few tweaks for a remake though, mainly just including fast travel way earlier and putting the objective markers on the map so you don't get lost. Even if they want the Morse Tower progression to stay the same, you could just have fast travel and call it something else. I would go with a Source spell that Jupiter or Depths have by default that just works the same way Zoom does in Dragon Quest. And for Lost Age, making that Trident fetch quest shorter would make the game way more enjoyable for me. Even better if the Trident becomes an actual weapon instead of some inconsequential key item. Speaking of those, we really need to keep key items, forgeables, and Synergy gems in a key item tab on the inventory. Making them waste through already limited inventory feels pointless. Difficulty options would be a must in my opinion too. Even if the Horde mode is just as simple as taking 30% more damage, doing 30% less, or something like that, it would be better than none at all. They could even include the Horde mode from the Lost Age as an expert mode and doesn't require you to beat the game to access it. Because it doesn't matter what kind of game it is, you shouldn't have to play the game on an easier difficulty to unlock a difficulty that's comfortable. Every player is different, so there's bound to be at least a few that are most comfortable on the highest difficulty from the get-go. Higher difficulty options would make boss fights more interesting than just spamming Jin and summons until they die. I'd also really like some added voice acting, but that's not really a requirement for a remake. Even if we get a new game and not a remake, these changes would still be appreciated. And it's not like Golden Sun is incapable of selling well. The first game sold a little over 1 million copies, and the other games aren't too far behind. And seeing how much of an RPG boom we're in right now, with even previously overlooked games like Xenoblade and Dragon Quest XI selling well on Switch, I think these games have a real chance with proper marketing. Persona 5, Dragon Quest XI, and Octopath Traveler are even showing that turn-based RPGs still have a sizable market and aren't outdated in people's eyes like some publishers seem to think. And hell, considering how old these games are now, there's even people that are nostalgic toward them now. and we all know how well nostalgia sells. I mean, hey, I'm not getting my hopes up, but these are some quality games that quite a few people clearly love. The extra attention wouldn't go to waste. Golden Sun's fanbase has had a bit of a resurgence in late 2018 as well. Something about Isaac just being an assist trophy again really struck a chord with some folks, and the fire didn't quite go out like it did before. Fan art of these characters was practically non-existent 2 years ago, and now there's plenty of it. That's a really great thing to see, if nothing else. I tend to feel like I'm screaming into a void with the amount of views these videos get, so it's possible this is just going into some Golden Sun echo chamber. But there's a Golden Sun shitpost account now, that's gotta mean something. So yeah, this series might not even have a future, but there's at least some people that clearly care. Including me, apparently. I made videos on this series out of curiosity since I really liked the first game when I played it, and I never would have imagined the sheer length that I'd talk about them for. Golden Sun might not be one of my favorites, but I'd say I'm a fan after all this. They may not be some of the best games I've ever played, but talking about them is weirdly fun. And these are really good games to get into RPGs with, due to their simplicity and lack of required grinding, while still being solid games in their own right. So if you're interested, track down a copy and give them a shot. They might suit your fancy a bit more than me. This has been Flame Guy, and if Golden Sun ever gets another entry, I'll be gladly back for more. Take care, and I'll see you all next mission. Seriously though, can we get Isaac and Smith?